Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Circuit to Barcelona, Catalunya, for the penultimate race of the Radical European Masters season. This is the middle race of a triple header this weekend that's going to bring what's been an excellent campaign to a close, and we've got 60 minutes of action to look forward to around the Barcelona Grand Prix circuit. Talking you through today's race, it's myself, Ben Evans. Alongside me is Will Brown, Radical Sports Cars, and lining up at the front of the field, Will, Paddy McLuhan, who had, alongside Victor Crea, a pretty wretched day yesterday.
Difficult day yesterday for this pairing in the Nilsson SR8 with some brake problems, but good to see them on pole there alongside James Swift, who was one of the stars of the early half of yesterday's race before being started lined in the pits. Yeah,
that was very odd. He just never emerged after his mandatory pit stop. Now, this could be very interesting. This is the car that's shared between Alain Costa and Johan Scheer, and that looks like Alain, who is starting the race. They shared a helmet in yesterday's race for reasons we know not. There is John Corbett, and John, his progress yesterday slightly hampered by contact with Ricardo Dona into the first corner, and although he fought back very well. Now, here is the car in fifth place. Terence Woodward and Ross Kaiser, they were dominant yesterday in the second phase of the race. Now, a finish for Terence and Ross today will be enough to give them the Masters Championship in this race.
That's right, yeah. They just require 10 points to score today out of a possible 40 overall points, and they've got it in the bag. So they'll be looking to consolidate and get a good result today. They're alongside Jeremy Ferguson, driving on his own in this race. Andrew's brother took the first race.
3-minute signal given to the drivers. The Supersport Championship is going to go all the way to the wire, because Bradley Ellis and Andy Cummings could, with a fair win behind them, overhaul Marcello Maritotto and Marco Cencetti. Yeah, just an 18-point difference between these two respective teams. So it's all to play for today, and obviously we've got 60 minutes of thrilling racing now, and then another 60 minutes this afternoon. And the crowd making sure that they get in to take their positions in good time for this first race of the day for the Radical European Masters, as the grid just beginning to be cleared. Now, one of the big question marks going to yesterday's race and then to today's race is, will the SR8s have to refuel? They all have to make a mandatory pit stop between the 20-minute and 40-minute mark. Yesterday, all the SR8s did refuel, but there was some frantic scrabbling with abacuses and spreadsheets in the hotel bar last night, which suggests that one or two of them think they could just about manage the fuel not to need to refuel. We'll come to that in a moment. Here is the grid then, with Paddy McLuhan and James Swift on the front row, then Alain Costa and John Corbett, Terence Woodward and Jeremy Ferguson on row 3, from Ozzy Youssef and Bradley Ellis, Jaap Bartels and Alex Capadia, then Mark Hignett and Pete Belshaw, who rounds out the 6th row, clear of Marcello Maritotto. John Caldwell will be hoping for a better day than he had yesterday, then Henning Enquist, Sean Gandar and James Abbott. But we understand that James may only be doing a handful of laps, and he also will be starting from the pit lane. So nonetheless, James, very impressive yesterday. So yes, the SR8s and refuelling, that is a big talking point. Yeah, that's right, and it certainly seems that the mood in the paddock, and from what we saw, as some of the drivers were pushed down to the end of the pit lane on the way out onto the grid formation. It looks like the teams are really trying to go as far as they can on this single tank. So yeah, there could be a few fireworks and maybe some surprises too at the end of the race if we see some teams dropping by the wayside. It's also very breezy today. There is a stiff tailwind along the start and finish straight, which will be helping the drivers a little bit as well. What that also means is that on the technical sections of the circuit, the notorious crosswinds from this Circuit to Catalunya Barcelona will possibly start to have an effect. So the 30-second board shown to the drivers. They will then have a green flag lap and form up ready for the rolling start to the race. Now, the way that performance is, of course, going to be balanced out is through the addition of success seconds in the pits. Now, the drivers who won yesterday, Woodward and Kaiser, they are going to be in the pits for a total of 105 seconds, which is 15 seconds more than James Swift, and it is 30 seconds more than Paddy McLuhan and Victor Crea. So a repeat triumph for Kaiser and Woodward seems a little bit unlikely as the cars go off on the formation lap. Now, the other car, Will, that was I'd expected to feature more yesterday, and it really struggled the second half of the race, was the spider of Jack Bartels and Stuart Mosley.
Yeah, it really looked like they were perhaps struggling with the pace. Certainly, but Mosley wasn't comfortable in the car, was he, yesterday? But yeah, of course, that car having the larger capacity fuel tank will be able to do the full distance, and they'll have no refueling worries at all. So if it's feeling good today, then they'll be able to push on without those range anxieties.
As will Jeremy Ferguson from 6th on the grid. There you see the black and yellow SR3, that's Bradley Ellis. He is the foremost of the Supersport class runners, and it was a fascinating duel yesterday between Ellis, Capadia and Cencetti for the honours of being the fastest Supersport driver. Marco Cencetti had the legs a little bit, but again, Cencetti and Maracciotto have got a lot of success seconds to overcome, so that could open the door for Cummings and Ellis, or indeed Capadia and Donor for the race win.
Yeah, now Donor, of course, who was tipped into a spin on the first corner of the first lap yesterday, and thereafter had some really good pace, as did Capadia as he fought his way back up through the grid. So I think they could be a pair to watch during this race.
Yeah, and the first corner is always a little bit congested, and so everybody will be hoping to get through that cleanly and in one piece. So the car's just heading around on this formation lap, getting a sense as to how the conditions have changed since yesterday. Cars racing yesterday lunchtime, and although the ambient air temperature is much the same, it's the breeze that's really picked up, and also the track with the big GT cars that we had racing yesterday afternoon has probably rubbered in quite a bit more.
Yeah, that's right. And as you say, with it being a little earlier in the day, I should think track conditions now will be about the best they've been all weekend for these guys. But yeah, that wind is going to certainly play a part today. We've seen it so often in the past that the drivers, certainly on the opening half of the lap as they rise over the top of the hill, can find the car being pushed wide by the crosswind. So yeah, it's going to make things a little bit more tricky today.
Cars heading into turn 10 now. This is one of the prime overtaking opportunities, the downhill run towards turn 10, although our thinking is that those that are looking to keep a weather eye on the fuel might just be not pushing themselves too hard into turn 10 or turn 1, because those are the steep downhill areas where you can just let the car coast a little bit.
Yeah, there's certainly some rumours of some of the teams looking to lift and coast, but ultimately whether or not the drivers will remember that when they're in the heat of the moment remains to be seen. But yeah, everybody lining up in formation now, just the final chicane to negotiate, and onto the rolling start.
So the field beginning to bunch up in the autumnal Spanish sunshine. This should be a very enjoyable 60 minutes or so of racing, as Paddy McGlue in the bright orange car paces the field. Alongside him is James Swift in the black and blue 87 car. Then it's the black and white car of Alain Costa and the all black car with the fluorescent yellow front winglet of John Corbett. They head through the final turn, looking to the gantry, waiting for the lights to come on, which they do now, and they flash out immediately, and away we go. And the race getting underway nice and early as they sprint towards turn 1. It's been a good start from James Swift, who looks to draw alongside Paddy McGluen as they head downhill, and indeed Swift just able to try and sneak in front of McGluen, but McGluen wants this into the first corner, breaks desperately deep, and in fact Alain Costa might go around the outside of him as well. Indeed he does. So McGluen drops down. John Corbett's also lost a couple of places.
Yeah, a little bit of a slide there as well from Belshire at the back. Just lost a few places to now be challenged by Hignett.
Through turn 3, this is where the buffeting of the wind would really start to affect them. And look at Bradley Ellis covering right to the inside line. That's Jack Bartels, John Corbett, Ozzy Youssef and Alex Capadia, all trying to find a way to sneak past. And already James Swift begins to build a little bit of a buffer over Alain Costa, McGluen, Woodward, Ferguson, Ellis, and there goes Capadia. Darts to the inside of Jack Bartels, also to the inside of John Corbett. And lots of scrabbling around in these early stages.
Yeah, Corbett pushed wide there by Bartels as he tries to find a way past Capadia, but it's all in vain at the moment.
John Corbett slipping down into the clutches of Marcello Maracciotto as they climb uphill towards turn 9. Corbett thinks about, in fact that's Maracciotto who was looking to challenge, as they're all now queuing up behind Alain Costa on the brakes to turn 10. And there is John Corbett, the first of the black cars. He's got Youssef just in behind him, then Marcello Maracciotto. head round turn 11. And this is part of the stadium section in front of the grandstands before ducking downhill out of 12 into the flip-flop chicane. Slows the cars down and then tees them up for the final corner and the end of this first lap.
And indeed, already that's given Swift a great opportunity to break away, and he's managed to pull out a 4.2 second lead over the opening lap. This is really hurting McLuhan. If he wants to get back and get past Costa, he needs to make it quickly before Swift makes his break.
Paddy McGlue, he's not close enough to challenge Alain Costa on this occasion. Now, this could be fun in the Supersport class. Capadia up with Ellis, or he was. Jack Bartels ducks the inside of Alex Capadia in the Spider. The diminutive SR3 tries to challenge around the outside. Jack Bartels having absolutely none of it. And because of so many of the downforce-dependent corners here, this is why we're seeing some of the SR3s mixing it a little bit closer to the Masters class cars than normal, as McLuhan goes through into second place. The inside of Alain Costa. Now, this is going to be interesting to see whether or not Paddy McLuhan's got the pace to try and reel in James Swift.
Yeah, and we know that Swift from earlier races this year, certainly his performance at Jerez, he's one of the best drivers at managing fuel strategy and being able to just hold a consistent lap time all the way to the end of the race. And in fact, he was demonstrating it in the first part of yesterday's race before he was sidelined with some mechanical issues. But yeah, he really needs McLuhan needs to put pressure on him now, and hopefully that'll then force Swift to step outside his comfort zone, and maybe that team have to rethink their fuel strategy.
Heading downhill out of turn 9, and this is where it could all change. John Corbett thinking about challenging Alex Capadia, but he's tucked up behind Alex, and then we've got Ozzy Youssef just in behind. Now, of the cars that we think are really aspiring to go without refuelling, it is John Corbett and Ozzy Youssef, and for now they're I think reasonably content just to be in that midfield.
Yeah, it's a good place to be. Obviously, they've got success seconds on the side as well. So, if they can just sort of manage their own pace without being caught up in the battles in front and behind them, then that'll put them in really good stead as they approach the pit window at the halfway distance.
Out of the final turn and along the front straight. Bradley Ellis defending from Jack Bartels as John Corbett and Ozzy Youssef can't but help themselves to ease past Alex Capadia. Capadia, though, looks to challenge back around the outside of Ozzy Youssef, and he manages to do that into turn 3.
And it's this middle sector of the lap that really benefits the SR3 with a good number of medium speed corners. It's a fast and flowing and very technical section, which is great, and a real boost to the SR3 guys with their really nice weight distribution.
Well, there is the SR3 Supersport class leader, Bradley Ellis, and this is exactly what he wants. Marcello Maritiotto currently third in class, but it's really the time differential that Ellis can open up over Maritiotto, which is absolutely key.
Yeah, we just see a replay here of John Cordwell just taking a wide line over the chicane there. Looks like that allowed Henning Engqvist to make his way through and take the place.
And that is the battle for 13th position, as Alain Costa in third has got Terence Woodward beginning to loom up onto his tail. But Alain Costa has been one of the drivers of the season for me. He is all but confirmed as the Fangio champion. Well, he is the Fangio champion because Mal Hales, his principal rival, isn't here this weekend.
Yeah, and he's as you said, he's been one of the real stars of this season, and took a podium finish yesterday, a very well-deserved podium place with the driver he's sharing with this weekend in Johan Scheer, the French professional driver. But yeah, he just sort of shows how if you're prepared to put in the graft and continue to learn the car over a number of seasons, you can do exceptionally well as a gentleman driver here.
Meanwhile, Jeremy Ferguson repasses Bradley Ellis as Jack Bartels considers the similar move into turn 1. Ellis currently running in 6th place overall. There is Jack Bartels just behind him, and this is looking a bit better for Bartels and Mosley because the car just looks as if they maybe went the wrong way with setup for yesterday's race, but certainly in these early stages both of the Spiders seem to be well up there in contention.
In lap times, they're a lot closer to the SR8s today. I think must have found the sweet spot with some thinking overnight and are right on the pace, and that's great to see.
And also, we saw during the pit stops yesterday as well that tyre pressures, one or two of the teams gambled a little bit, went the wrong direction, and that was causing the the cars to move around a little bit more than they'd have wanted to. So Jeremy Ferguson in 5th, Bradley Ellis in 6th, Jack Bartels is 7th. Ahead of them up the road, it's Terence Woodward in 4th, Alan Costa's 3rd, Paddy McLuhan is in 2nd, and James Swift leads the way. He's 6.2 seconds clear of Paddy McLuhan.
Yeah, at the moment, McLuhan doesn't really seem to have a reply to the pace that Swift's putting on. 48.4 there, the fastest lap of the race so far. But yeah, it's an ever-increasing gap between Swift and McLuhan.
There is Alan Costa, 3rd place.
It looks like he's just managed to grow some air from Woodward as well.
Yeah, it would appear to be the case. And one of the real challenges racing here in Barcelona, of course, is the turbulent air from the spoilers of the car in front. Can be really hard to drive through in some of the mid-speed corners because you're constantly being buffeted. The car's understeering a little bit. There is McLuhan in 2nd place. 6.4 seconds back from James Swift, who has just set the fast lap of the race. Oh, and a big moment behind for somebody running very, very well. I think it was Ozzy Yusuf who had a massive moment coming through the final corner. Or was it Alex Capadia? In fact, it looks as if it could be Capadia who is pulling off the road. We'll try and
Yeah, there was certainly a car there at 90 degrees to the race circuit, wasn't there? A big spin for somebody and a puff of dust. We'll wait to see who that was. The
final corner here in Barcelona is not the sort of place you want to be having a moment. It is an intimidating turn.
Yeah, very, very high speed, and the wall on the exit really does come very, very close and very, very quickly. So, yeah, very lucky not to avoid a bigger impact there, particularly with the number of other cars around him.
There is the Supersport leader, Bradley Ellis, whose task we made much easier. Now here we sit. Oh, it was John Corbett who had a massive spin, and that's why Yusuf went one way, Capadia went the other. Oh, and Alex Capadia very, very fortunate to somehow squeeze through that gap. I think he picked up a bit of damage because there was just a little bit of contact, but that could have been a very, very nasty incident.
Yeah, I think he may have just sustained some maybe some rear upright damage there, but yeah, a very, very quick reactions there to avoid a bigger accident. So, yeah, pretty lucky there.
Coming through the final turn then to complete lap 5 of the race is James Swift, and he accelerates over the line. That a slightly slower lap from Swift, 1 minute 48.2. Plays 1 minute 47.9 from McLuhan, who is just coming back at him. But I suspect for James Swift, thinking about the long game for this race, he wanted to put in some laps early on to establish a buffer. And I think we're now going to see a little bit more of a balancing and management of the pace.
This is true, although McLuhan's just responded with a 47.9, so he's now coming back at Swift. If he can maintain this 6.1 second advantage, and looking at the success seconds difference as well, even if McLuhan and Correa they also don't refuel, then yeah, it's looking pretty good for him at the moment. Of course, Correa and McLuhan with 75 seconds and Swift with 90. You know, he can certainly match the pace of Correa and possibly extend that out to 15 seconds.
Oh, that's disappointing to see. Ozzy Yusuf comes into the pit lane. I think he must have just brushed Capadia, and they've both sustained a little bit of suspension damage from that impact.
Yeah, a real shame there. But as you say, we were lucky not to have a more serious outcome.
So to a halt.
Just wanted possibly some radiator damage as well.
A frustrated Ozzy Yusuf. Here is the race, or the fight for 3rd place rather. Alan Costa just up clear of Terence Woodward, and they've now got about a 4-second buffer over Jeremy Ferguson in 5th. Yeah, Bartels has come through into 6th, just clear Bradley Ellis. But Paddy McLuhan is getting the hammer down in 2nd place. He's opened up a decent buffer now over Alan Costa, and has just set the fastest Sector 2 of anybody in the race. We've got another car in trouble, and that is Henning Enquist, who has gone off at turn 5 and is comprehensively beached.
Yeah, and he looked quite close to the racing line there as well, so I'm wondering if that might precipitate a safety car period.
Well, the circuit team here, and we've got another car that's in trouble, and that's Jack Bartels up at turn 11, and again, he is beached right to the periphery of the circuit. And I was about to say the circuit staff have done an excellent job so far this weekend of recovering cars onto wave yellow flag situations.
That looks like that's
James Abbott.
James Abbott just taking the place from Yusuf.
That's a frustrating little spin for Henning Enquist, and really it's one of those where the punishment actually probably doesn't fit the crime.
Yeah, unfortunately there, of course, the circuit drops away quite steeply, so as soon as that SR3 rotated, the gradient's just going to accelerate that.
James Swift still leads. Paddy McGluen in second. This is the fight for third. Alain Costa and Terence Woodward. Yes, they are going to cover it over at turn 5. Underway of yellow flags. And the same up at turn 11 for Jaap Bartels, who might be able to get underway with a little bit of assistance. He was only just at the very, very edge of the gravel trap. Out of turn 9 now. The Woodward and Costa fight. Here is super slow motion of James Swift. He's riding the curbs. Now, after yesterday's problems in the pits, I wonder if James is going to come in right when the pit window opens in about 7 minutes' time to get that out of the way. There, indeed, is the recovery at turn 11. So that's also being covered under the waved yellow flag, which is good news, because a safety car just approaching the pit window would have turn the race on its head a little bit, whereas at least now they're going to be able to continue as planned through the final turn. This is the end of lap 7, as Henning Enquist is indeed back underway, but he's probably going to get a bit of a shock when he jumps on the brakes at turn 7 and the gravel comes out all over the car.
Yeah, it sounds like a beach on that first application of the brakes as all the gravel dislodges itself, but yeah, back up the front here again. That gap's just closed a little bit more again now. McLuhan 5.4 adrift of Swift, but yeah, as you quite rightly said, I can see Swift taking an early pit stop here to then being able to maximise the advantage, and hopefully it'll give them fresh air as well during the pit stops as well.
Well, Terence Woodward is a little bit closer to Alain Costa than he was on the previous lap. He gained 0.8 last time around. The yellow flag has been retracted at turn 5, so they can get through there without any delay. It's also now been retracted at turn 11, so that is good news. So both of the cars that went off, I think, are probably both back into the fray. Well, there is McLuhan. The red masking tape, by the way, a relic of yesterday's moment for Victor Correa, who went out of the race on his out lap into turn 4, and the car skitters across the gravel trap, just bumped into the tyres. We've got a black flag for car 5, and that's Jaap Bartels. So Jaap Bartels is back underway, but not for long. He's been black flagged. Now, that's quite unusual.
I think the regulations for the European Masters unfortunately mean that if you receive assistance and rejoin, then that is the end of your race, unfortunately.
So in that case, we can expect to see the similar thing being applied for Henning Enquist, who...
But yeah, going back to Correa there and McLaren, they were just struggling with brakes yesterday after the first few opening laps. Paddy said after the race that he certainly felt like the brakes weren't to his liking, and then when Correa went out on his out lap, he found pretty quickly that it wasn't his liking either, and sort of went straight on and into the wall. But yeah, the Nilsson Racing team have done a great job to get that car back out overnight.
Well, there was the pass for 5th place. Jeremy Ferguson up ahead of Bradley Ellis, but Ellis continues to lead the Supersport class from Marcello Marattiotto and Peter Belschel. Now, that retirement for Alex Capedia is actually very significant, because what it means is that really it removes Ricardo Dona from the Supersport Championship battle. Yeah,
that's right. So now it's a straight two-way fight between the SR3 of Marattiotto and Cincetti and Cummings and Ellis, of course, and they're...
Well, there's a 4-point differential from first to second, and this is the problem, that for Marattiotto and Cincetti, they can finish second in both races today and let Ellis and Cummings win, and that would still be enough to give them the Supersport Championship. So really, Ellis and Cummings need to win these races, but they also need something to go a little bit wrong for Cincetti and Marattiotto. Although, for Cincetti and Marattiotto, now that we've lost Henning Enquist from the race, he has retired into Part Ferme. We've lost Alex Capedia. That's 2 of the Supersport class cars that won't be scoring points because they've retired. Therefore, it just makes things a little
It's
bit...
going to be very delicately balanced going into that final race, isn't it? Yes, as we see now, looks like Ellis has finally been able to make his way clear of Ferguson up to 5th overall. So this is exactly what they need in the opening stages, because we know that Cenchetti's going to be a real match for Cummings in the second half of the race.
And in fact, Jeremy Ferguson has dropped a long way back from Bradley Ellis since Ellis snuck through at turn 3. Now, it might be that Ferguson has just decided to let Ellis go and run at the pace he wants. Meanwhile, at the very, very front of the field, James Swift sets another fastest lap, a 1 minute 47.7. And if he is doing this, managing the whole thing on a single tank of fuel, then he is doing remarkably well.
Yeah, and as you say, it's so similar to what we saw at the start of the season in Jerez. So hopefully the 360 Racing squad have done their sums right overnight, and yeah, this is going to be an interesting and I'm sure a very tense time coming into the final laps of the race.
I'd imagine the 360 team would have looked at it from every angle, certainly, before making the decision what to do in the pit stops. Alain Costa in 3rd place, still going very, very strongly, as into the pits comes James Abbott in the development car. So I think they'll probably make a few adjustments to that.
Yeah, that car's out on Monday here with some various new customers looking for 2016 to try that car. So I think they're happy with its performance over the course of the weekend so far, and they'll be looking forward to using that on Monday.
So yeah, Bartels obeying the black flag, and as you say, Will, he got craned back onto the track, and if that is indeed contrary to regulations, then unfortunately it is game over for Jaap Bartels. And yeah, Stuart Mosley knows that's the case, leans into the cockpit to confer. Well, there is Costa, who once more just ekes out a couple of tenths of a second over Terence Woodward. That gap goes now to 1.1 seconds. Let's fight for 3rd and 4th, one of the closest battles that we've got on the track. James Swift, our race leader, leads by 6.5 seconds from McLuhan. Then it's a gap of some 15 seconds or so back to this tussle.
It's quite a smart drive here by Woodward. Of course, he doesn't need to take any risks if he wants to hold on to that championship lead, and I think there's no real need for him to try and make an aggressive pass on Costa if he knows that Kaiser's in the car for the second half of the race.
And given that Terence Woodward just really needs to bring the car home for a decent finish in order to secure the championship in this race, if he were to risk a move on Costa and it all went wrong, he'd find it's an incredibly long walk to Barcelona Airport this evening. Yeah,
and certainly a very lonely one. So you see that looks like Hignett. Oh, maybe a brief little bit of contact there between Hignett and Gandar.
Well, Jean Gandar tried to defend that, but it was a little bit late. So Hignett was through. Now here is Paddy McLuhan. He's just about to pick his way past Brian Caldwell, John Caldwell rather, yes, yeah. And John doing what he would have been told to do by Brian Poulter, the race director, in the briefing, which is he's just sticking to the racing line and letting the faster car find a way around him. Although possibly just having a little bit of a defend into...
well, and it's a difficult part of the circuit to pass on, because the line is relatively narrow, and it's difficult to really get the straight line speed of the... I'm just wondering, there doesn't appear to be any blue flags out, do there?
No, Paddy McLuhan, yeah, gives a little bit of a glance to John Caldwell, but yeah, there didn't appear to be the signalling, as the pit window is now open, but they've got to go past the sign which says that the pit window is open before they can pit in. So it's really going to be the lap after this one where we will start to see the flurry of pit stops. Paddy McLuhan, now he's cleared Caldwell, is released back into clear air. Jean Gandar is into the pits. Now that possibly is in line with what you spotted, Will, that there might have been just a hint of contact when Mark Hignett slid past him.
Yeah, and it's quite possible as well that that speed differential and the ease with which Hignett passed him could indicate that Gandar was already suffering with a technical issue there, maybe.
So we're at just over 1/3 race distance, and James Swift remains our race leader. Paddy McLuhan in 2nd place, Alain Costa 3rd, Terence Woodward is 4th, 5th is Bradley Ellis, our Supersport class leader, 6th is Jeremy Ferguson, 7th Marcello Maratotto, 2nd Supersport.
Oh, brief trip across our grass for McLuhan, and quickly back on track, but he doesn't want to do too much of that.
Now in 8th place, fascinatingly, it is, Jean Gandar's not going to the pits, so John Corbett, who's in 9th on your screen, he moves up to 8th. Now, my understanding is that they are going to try and get that car to the flag without refuelling it. And that means that Corbett's been running consistently at a lap time of a 1 minute 53.
Yeah, of course, he's handing over to Asian single-seater race. Jamie Winslow will be doing the second half. So I would think Jamie, with his extensive experience in sports car racing, of course, an LMP2 driver with a lot of experience, and also in single-seaters as well, he'll be pretty good at managing that fuel strategy and sticking to a lap time.
Just wonder, though, whether an average lap speed of something like a 1 minute 53 is actually going to be enough to really benefit them over the course of the race. Yes, they'll save some time by not refuelling, but what it also means is they won't be able to pick things up late on. Now, into the pits now comes Terence Woodward. This is going to be the big indication about whether or not they'll need to refuel. Also in is John Caldwell. Caldwell rolls to a halt. His mechanic is there with the drinks bottle. Terence Woodward is to a halt now, and he is going to be refuelling. So clearly the 360 team feel that it's not quite worth the risk.
Well, it's certainly not worthwhile taking the risk. If they can, simply for a finish, they'll score more points than they need to secure the title. So really there's no point in risking it for them. Bring that car and guarantee a finish.
Alain Costa, will he duck into the pits on this occasion to hand over to Johan Scheer, or will he, now that he's not got Woodward harrying him, continue onward? From our country box window, we can see there's a bit of a problem as well for John Caldwell, unfortunately, as he's come in. The rear cover of the car has been removed. Now, also from our commentary box window, we can see that John Corbett is in to hand over to Jamie Winslow, and they are not refuelling. So, car 69, they are going to gamble on making that fuel tank last the whole hour.
And this is going to make for a really exciting race, and this is what Radical European Masters is all about. You know, teams having to use a bit of thought and maybe go different ways on strategies. This is going to be a fascinating finale, and depending on which way it goes, of course, it'll set up that final race of the day as well.
Certainly will do. Alain Costa is again very nicely poised as Paddy McLuhan finds a way around Mark Hignett. That's to put a lap on Mark and McLuhan and Victor Correa. Well, certainly the car seems to be much better behaved today, because it looked, clearly brakes were an issue, but it looked like all manner of a handful in yesterday's race, and much steadier today.
Yeah, and likewise greatly improved from Monza. They were really struggling there as well, just to get a handle on the setup they needed. But no, if you look at the steering inputs and the way that the car's moving around, it looks a lot more direct and planted, doesn't it?
Yeah, yesterday what was really odd was that the car was kicking away from both McLuhan and Correa mid-corner.
Yeah, and as I said, Paddy just wasn't confident at all on the brakes, as you could see coming into the key zones. He was so much earlier, and that really hampered their progress.
McLuhan yet to pit in, as is our race leader James Swift. Here is Swift. Now, it's going to be a big question, of course, about whether the 360 team roll the dice, quite literally, given his livery.
Yeah, all the while we see our SR3 class champion-elect also jumping into the pits now, so Maritiotto's in to hand over to Cenchetti. And
there
he is.
The pit stop, and Marco Cenchetti, being a little bit more diminutive than Marcello Maritiotto, has his seat insert fitting in. But I think if Maritiotto were to win the Supersport Championship, it'd be just a wonderful story after the monumental accidents he had at Spa last year. To bounce back this way in 2015 is wonderful to see.
Yeah, and he's been the bridesmaid so many times and never quite been able to make it all come together in one season. But no, their consistency has been far stronger this year, and he's really. He's a fantastic success story of the Radical sort of championship system. Came up through racing in the UK and some sporadic in the Radical Clubman's Cup and the UK Cup and the SR3 Challenge, and now to really dominate and be one of the most consistent drivers out there in the European scene. It's a fantastic achievement for them.
I mean, we're talking off mic about this a little bit earlier on, but the Radical ladder, for the drivers that are prepared to work at it, the opportunity for them to develop as competitors is just so immense.
Yeah, and you can see that Marcel's really put the training in this year, and after his huge shunt at certainly season-ending shunt at Spa last year that put paid to a championship hopes there. To bounce back and come back stronger than ever this year, and it's been a really great achievement for them, and well deserved.
We also just had a little bit of a glimpse into the pits at Alain Costa, pitting in turned over to Johan Scheer. The good news is that Johan has been able to source a helmet and hands device.
He has indeed, and they're taking fuel on, so taking no chances there. And it'd be interesting to see. Scheer's pace was really impressive in the early stages of yesterday's race, and let's see if he can repeat it today.
We are just about approaching half-race distance. We only got a handful of cars that haven't pitted in. James Swift, the race leader, is one of them. Paddy McLuhan in second place is the next of them, and then Bradley Ellis, who's now in third, and the Supersport leader. Well, we know that he will stay in the pits and stay on the track rather until the last possible second in the pit window before handing over to Andy Cummings. Peter Belshaw and Mark Hignett also remain out on track. Well, along the start and finish, straight into the braking zone for turn one. There you see the gap from Swift to McLuhan, 9.1 seconds. But I think that Victor Carrere might fancy his chances. It's an inheritable position. The other driver, I think, who could really feature for victory, I have to say, is Jeremy Ferguson. Particularly if these front-running SR8s do indeed need to refuel.
Yeah, and Jeremy again, another great stalwart of radical racing, both in the SR3 and the SR8, and been a little bit unlucky this year with the results, but in previous years and certainly in occasions with the SR8 has shown that he's got the pace as one of the strongest single drivers out there.
So here is McLuhan, and this is the best we've seen Paddy going. Now Johan Scheer emerges from the pits. His pit handicap was some 20 seconds plus the additional time I had to spend putting the fuel in the car, because you do have to spend additional seconds in there if you do refuel. The other car, I'm sad to report, that remains in situ in the pits is that of John Caldwell. The rear cowling coming on and off that car, and also the front nose cone has been removed as well.
Yeah, meanwhile we rejoin our leader there, Swift now. He's looking very strong, and you get a really good demonstration of just what it takes to be a real front-running SR8 driver here. Minimal steering inputs. You can see that car so well hooked up to that final complex and round the final corner as he powers onto another lap.
Well, Ross Kaiser is taking it steady by setting the fastest lap of the race by over half a second for anybody else. A 1 minute 47.3 for Ross Kaiser. In fact, James Swift has just done his best lap, a 1 minute 47.4. So Kaiser clearly taking it easy. As into the pit lane comes Paddy McLuhan. McLuhan is in to hand over to Victor Carrere. Now the big question, of course, is going to be, is some fuel going to go in? And the answer to that would appear to be yes, it is. The car gets earthed, McLuhan gets out. Fuel goes
quite
in.
a lot of fuel as well. That's a full 25 metre dump churn. A little brief rest there as the fuel didn't quite first engage, so that's might have cost him just a couple of seconds.
Well, Victor Carrere is rightly regarded as one of the quickest SR8 pilots out there, but he does have a little bit of reputation of maybe being slightly less sympathetic with the fuel economy than some of the other drivers. And I'd imagine that they're giving Victor a full tank of fuel so he can go out and absolutely wring the neck on that car. Yeah,
and I think he's got as good a chance as any now. The way that Paddy was driving in that first half, he'll have his best chance with some fairly fresh tyres and brakes and what have you. So yeah, this is the best chance probably that Victor's had all season of having a box fresh car to really push on in the second half.
Also into the pit lane, we just saw Mark Hignett. That's to hand over to Ollie Hancock, as James Swift remains on his way. This is the 17th lap of the race. We're just over half race distance.
Yeah, just 9 minutes remaining of the pit window. So, it's not too much longer before we see the Swift show his hand.
But I'm just looking to the pit area. The 360 Racing team are not even out on the apron, so they clearly think it's going to be another few moments, as Ross Kaiser has posted another fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 47.1. But again, it's thinking about the differentials, because post pit stops, Kaiser is 30 seconds back from Jeremy Ferguson, so that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that Kaiser would want to engage in battle with Winslow or Scheer, who are directly ahead of him. So I would think if he gets to a point when he's struggling to make an easy pass on Winslow, he could well just sit behind and accept the points.
Well, James Swift is looking at 20 seconds of additional pit handicap time, but given that he was able to get about 10 seconds over McLuhan and Correa, that is not insurmountable for James Swift. He is one of 3 drivers yet to make their pit stop, the other being Bradley Ellis, which we could guess, and also Peter Belshaw, who is clearly electing to stay out until fairly deep in this pit window. And it's interesting actually to see with the driver nominations this weekend, Will, that most of the teams are putting in the pro driver for the closing stages of each race.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's just because they've got a little bit more experience in terms of managing the car when the tyres and the rest of the setup is a little bit past its best.
Well, Ross Kaiser and Terence Woodward are one of the most successful driver combinations in radical racing. They've been together as a driver pairing for several years and just always seem to complement each other very well.
It is. It's been a few years in coming. They, of course, previous Radical Masters champions and UK Cup champions as well. But it's been a couple of years since they last took a title. As we see, this is Bradley Ellis diving into the chicane here to overtake Ferguson. Looks like he runs really deep. Does he get the car stopped in time? Yes, he does.
Yeah, Bradley Ellis, I'm sure, having an enormous amount of fun, and he's lapping well inside the 1 minute 50-second bracket. He's only a couple of seconds a lap off the absolute pace, but then Jeremy Ferguson powers back past Ellis.
Yeah, a real demonstration there of the relative merits of the different models.
Oh, and then Ellis darts back through turn 5.
There, yeah.
I think both of those drivers would really just quite like to be on a different part of the track from each other, but that's not the way that it has worked out, as our race leader James Swift, now on his 19th lap, he's got time, if he really wants it, for probably 3 more laps before he needs to duck in, because the pit window, although it officially closes with 20 minutes left on the clock, actually you have to go past the pit lane closed board before you start to get into a little bit of trouble for pitting outside the window.
Yeah, that's right. So providing he enters the pits before the board is hung out, even if it's hung out during these final lap on the in lap, then that's not a problem.
Out of turn 10 and climbing uphill for.
At the moment, this is exactly what he wants to see. He's got good clear air both in front and behind him. This is perfect. This is really playing into his strategy, in fine way.
Yeah, there's absolutely no need, is there, for James Swift to pit in, other than wanting to maybe get the pit stop out of the way, because that's where it all fell over yesterday. And now into the pit lane he comes, and can see the 360 Racing Team from our commentary box window. It looks like he is going to get a little bit of a top up of fuel going into the car.
That's an interesting development. So you see him just peel down into the box in the middle. Yep, sure enough, there's the Bowser waiting for him.
Well, if you think about the pace that John Corbett was running earlier on, trying to conserve fuel, it's about 4 seconds a lap adrift from the pace that James Swift has been going at, and actually that's quite a lot of fuel going in as well for James Swift. So Victor Crair goes past, and essentially Crair now is racing a car that's static in the pit lane, so he needs to, if he can complete the next lap before James Swift emerges, then Crair will jump him and take the lead.
Yeah, so tense couple of moments for both teams, but of course Correa, having taken on a fuel load, he's not going to be worrying about whether or not he needs to make that car last to the end of the race. He can really push on hard, and this is where we see Correa at his best. He's a blindingly fast driver over a single lap, and this could be a really, there's going to be some fireworks here for sure.
And I suspect that's possibly why James Swift has been given the full tank, which is that it would have been noticed that Victor Crair has got a full tank to play with, and then can
they obviously
really push
believe
on.
that